Well, welcome back to another session of the 7th grade painting project, the watercolor painting we're doing here. You can see the watercolor kit down there at the bottom of the screen. And we're going to get started here, and we're going to continue to work our way down the street until we have completed this painting here. And so we are really making quite good progress on it. And yesterday, when we left off, I was working on this door here. We filled in these doors and so forth, and the details, signage there, windows as we go along, another signage. So we're just going to keep on working our way down until we just only have just the minor details left to work with. And so as a result of that, we're going to continue doing what we were doing some more today. I would like to, this next building right here is probably going to be, I'm looking at the colors that we've used, and probably violet is the color that has not been used on a building front yet. And so we're going to start with that. Now the violet, if this is green and this is blue, then this one right here is going to be violet. Okay, this it's right between, it's between the brown and the blue. So it's violet. It looks very close to the black in a lot of ways. Alright, so make sure your brush is clean and dried off before we start doing this. And we're going to transfer a drop of water, not coffee, but water, into the violet. And I'm going to stir it around a bit. And I want it to be a strong color, but transparent enough too that it's not all really pasty and gooey. So I'm going to clean off the end of my brush here, and then I'm going to just test this to see what happens. I'm going to use a slip sheet so that I don't smudge up any work that I've already done. So I'm going to place my, there we go. Now you want it to be kind of a lighter colored violet. If it's super dark, then you really need to add some more water, clean your brush out, you know, so that you can dilute that color a little bit. We want it to show up as violet, not like a real black color, which it can be confused for. So we're only using the finest point of the brush. I keep saying that all the time, but some things never change, ladies and gentlemen. So here we are, still making a watercolor, but it takes time to make quality work, and I think that's the difference between people who can really make good artwork and people who are just, you know, in a class and maybe learning something, but probably struggling to make the artwork. It's all the attention to focus and the detail work that usually wears people down mentally. Tucking those little corners together, like, it's so important to people who make these kinds of things, and it's important to them, but to other people it's not quite so important. Okay, that looks pretty good. It's definitely not blue. It's obviously got blue content in it, but you know, there's no blue. Alright, so we'll just keep on keeping on with this. Now see, this particular most recent violet that I just put on there is very dark, and so I'm going to just try to, you know, move that around before it dries, that really dark color. I've got to hold my breath a little bit. I've got a little shaky control this morning. Okay, so alright, well, we are making some progress here, but all this fine work is just slow going. And even though the buildings technically do get smaller as we get farther down the road, they get more detailed, and I guess that's the problem. That's why it slows down sometimes to almost a creep. Alright, so I'm just going to keep working on this. Carefully trimming around the doors and any other details if I have to. This one seems to have a lot of details in it. So. And you just got to keep moving the paint around so that you get a nice even color. And using only the very finest point of the brush. light pressure. If you mash down on the brush, you kind of deform its fibers a bit, and then that makes it difficult to get any level of control with it. Okay, we're going to continue over here. This is working pretty good now. It's nice and fluid, rich violety color, kind of that grape jelly purple effect. I think this is actually like part 5 of our painting video, I do believe. My nose is running like crazy, people. Be careful. Hold your breath sometimes to get that really close control. Alright, there we go. See, now, it does come together faster sometimes than people think, but it's a kind of, it's long attention span work here in projects. So that's what we kind of are involved in here in the visual arts program, is building sustained focus and long attention spans, and what it's all about. It's called learning. Okay, this is going to have to be, there we go, because it was a light patch right there in that violet. I wanted to smooth out so it's all like the same color. And so you really just got to keep the watercolor moving around. A lot of people just try to treat it like it's a crayon or something, and just crayon it in. But you really do need to keep moving the paint around if you want to get quality results. Alright. The violet building is looking pretty violet. So pick up another bit. I think I might need a little bit of water in there. See what happens here. Alright, so see, the paper is absorbent, and it has a tendency to want to, using what we call capillary action, it's like when you get a towel or washcloth wet, it tends to soak up the paint pretty quickly. But then, while it's soaking it up, the paper gets, kind of wet, and so as a result of that, it doesn't dry so quickly. And so you can, if you're attentive to what you're doing, you can move that paint around on that partially wet surface. So I'm trying to focus and concentrate at the exact same time that I'm also trying to paint and explain things. So those are not always two activities that go together real well. So we've got to keep moving that paint around. So we get a nice even color. Yeah, that's good. Okay, same thing again. Just very careful work. And I am painting the exact same size paper as you all are painting on. Furthermore, I'm using the exact same paint kit that we use in the art classroom, so my paint kit's not any better than anybody else's. And I'm also using the exact same brushes that the 6th and 7th graders use. And I even use a 6th grade brush when I'm teaching 8th grade art too, just to show them that it's not really the brush so much as it is the person that is moving the brush around, right? So if you can build a long attention span, a lot of complicated things in the world will be a lot easier. Some patience will make it a lot easier. So that's just one of those things that if you don't develop it at a young age, you will struggle with it probably for a long time. So being able to have a long attention span, sustained mental focus, all of that is really important. And who would have thought that you'd learn anything like that in art, right? Okay. Just gotta stay focused. There we go, because right now this very, very tight, detailed work can go completely off the rails sometimes. Okay, but that looks pretty good. Now, I'm going to keep at it here. I think my paint is getting a little bit dried out there, so I'm going to have to move about a bit here. Okay, so this is going to be some very, very tricky work right in here, and then above that even some other trickier work, it looks like. And then we'll go back and start doing some detail work. So we paint wet paint next to already existing dry paint. That's what we're attempting to do. Okay. Man, it's tedious as you get farther down the street too. The spaces that we put the paint into get smaller and smaller as well. So more detailed work at the end of the street because everything is so much smaller, and the paintbrush, of course, is not any smaller. And it's not really how small the paintbrush is anyway. It's all about how you carry that little bead of paint around on the tip of that paintbrush. That looks pretty good, I think, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going to get this last little bit right here and move on to something else, because sometimes this kind of work is very time consuming, and it's also very mentally tiring. So I have to continuously move around the painting. Since it is video, I can't really turn the painting upside down. It wouldn't really make good sense to the viewers. Okay, but it is starting to look pretty good here. I have to move my paint out of the way. Now, this is going to be tricky. It's going to be tricky. Okay, just got to hold your breath. Alright, now I'm going to let that dry out and move back to something else right now. So that's looking pretty good, I gotta say. So good, I'll drink a little coffee. Now, Wright State University Student Services Division, of course, is not purple. It just is in this town. It actually would be out at Wright State. I do believe it was a beige building with green signs and stuff, but this is a painting. It's not necessarily a reproduction of reality, okay? So I'm gonna, there we go. Now, let's go back to the blue building, and we can fill in some doors and some more work there. And since we're working with, oh, good Lord, man, maybe we may hit the drawing table. That's bad for the video. Now, we'll go, like I was saying, we're already working with the violet, so rather than completely clean out our brush, we can just pick up some of that violet, and I'm going to paint in a couple of the little panes on my stained glass window here, and maybe one up here. Would be a nice violet-y color, would be appropriate for there. Okay, and maybe even one down here, because these two windows were from the previous session, these two little panes, that's the little glass portion of a window, and they're dry on either side, so I can paint right next to them with no real fear that the colors will infuse together. And that's really one of the more common problems that students have, is that lack of control. Their desire to have that control is there, but their knowledge of the materials is not, until you've made enough paintings and you've fought with them and you know, succeeded and failed a lot of times in order to make your painting. So we'll leave that one alone for now. So I'm going to go back and put some more brown on my doors of my blue building here. I just think that that seems to be the right color, if you ask me, for doors, and that's just my opinion. But you know, and everybody's entitled to their opinion. But I've made a couple paintings, and it seems to make logical sense. So I'm going to keep at the brown wooden door effect, and as you can see, it can take a long time to make these paintings, and that sustained mental focus is critical to making complicated artwork, which when this started out, if you recall, many weeks ago, when our drawing unit started, we just had a blank piece of paper. And from that blank piece of paper, with a little bit of planning and a good lesson, and you know, some effort on the part of the student, now look where we're at. We're really probably about 80% done with the painting, I guess I'd have to say. And so the smallest areas are the ones that really seem to take the longest time. And then painting around curves is also pretty tricky work that many times leads to a great deal of frustration and lack of control. So those kinds of issues are the whole reason that, you know, you're kind of taking artists to learn how to work out those issues. If you choose to go into the arts, then you'll have something we call experience, and experience is a good thing. Okay. And since we're painting this brown right up next to already existing dry blue paint, you can get a great deal of good control that way, especially if you're just barely letting the pressure of the brush, just almost not even the weight of the brush, just the lightest of touches with the brush. And you get very fine control. So we just continuously are going back and addressing detail work in previous areas of the painting. As they dry, we can go back and, you know, work on dressing up the details, smoothing out the colors if that's what you're attempting to do. Now this one is kind of getting that wood grain look to it, but I'm really just going for one continuous smooth color if I can achieve it. And that's why you see me going back over the paint a lot and addressing those areas that are, I think, not quite the same color value. Alright, here we go. Getting somewhere here. This is looking fantastic. Okay, so that looks pretty good. We'll do the same thing again. And I mean, if you're following along with me, that's probably a pretty good idea, my opinion. Okay, if you're not following along with me, you may end up with some issues that you don't know how to solve. I'm instructing direct instruction here this way so that we can work out those problems together. If you're struggling on your own, well, then you should probably pause the video or replay it. All of the answers are in the videos. And I get questions from students, you know, they just are starting to drop into the e-learning situation we've got here. And, you know, we're on our third project. They want to know, what did they miss? And the answer is, you're going to have to go back and watch the videos, because there's just too much information to put out there to one person, to give them 33 or 37 days of instruction. You know, which is where we probably would be right now in a typical physical classroom setting. So, yeah, the videos are really critical to people's understanding, and they need to be keeping up with this almost every day, I would say, just like as if you were in physical school. You'd have to go to class every day. And then when you weren't in class, at least in art class, you're falling behind on something. And it can be difficult to make that stuff up. You can't really get the time back. You just have to work twice as hard. So the videos should be helpful in that respect, at least. Okay, so this is looking pretty good too. It's pretty even color. I probably shouldn't mess with it much more. When I do, because I'm really picky about how I want it to look, and so sometimes I just get a little bit overly picky, and I should just let things be, right, so that they look good. But that is not really very dark, so I'm going to have to monkey with that a little bit more. But I feel confident because I'm painting next to already dry paint. And so you can add a little more water to your watercolor cell, and or just wet the brush. That's really a lot more of it than just putting water into the paint kit. It's more really just getting the brush, you know, just barely wet, just the very pointiest part of the brush. But see, people soak their brushes, and they soak the brush in a rinse water cup, and all of that water gets trapped behind this metal part. And then no matter how much you dry it out, it just keeps soaking down into the brush, leaching into the brush. And it's really difficult to get that to stop without getting an already dry brush. And so you really have to be careful about soaking paint brushes. I really discourage it when people try it. I tell them not to do it. But they do anyway. Alright, we're making good progress here. Let's keep on keeping on here. I think what I'm going to do is make this sign and this sign red, but I'm going to keep it kind of watered down a bit so that my red is a little bit transparent and we can see through it, okay? And we want to be able to see the letters showing through the paint. So that's what we're going to attempt to do here by just using some red, melting it a bit, but not too much. And then I really like to rinse out the brush and clean it before I start all this, you know, putting the actual paint onto the painting. Okay, let's see what happens here when we do this. I've got to move my paint kit. Alright, we'll start with the We Deliver. Ah, that's maybe a little too thin. I really thought it would be darker than that. Okay, let's try this. Yeah, that's darker. Alright, and we did deliver. We delivered a lot of pizzas. Got to the point where I didn't even like pizza anymore. It took me years to get over that. Car smelled like pizza. Clothes smelled like pizza. It was great. But you could make a, you know, for a college kid, you keep your car running, you can make a living that way at least. It wasn't easy, but you could do it. Okay, so this is really coming along. You might have noticed if you're using kind of thin paper that your paper is starting to kind of buckle up and have some crinkle up in some areas, and that's just natural. The watercolor, when you put water on paper, it kind of relaxes the fibers a bit, and then when it dries they contract all kind of strangely, and that's what causes this non-uniform kind of buckling of the paper. Now that though is watercolor, specific watercolor paper, which this is not. This is drawing paper, but it suits fine for watercolor. That's the watercolor paper doesn't quite have the same problem with the surfaces getting all crinkled up. Okay, so here we are again, back at the fine detail work right along the edge of the sign, holding your breath. There we go. Very good. Very good. Okay. So, let's see what we got. It does say we deliver. It looks pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the upper sign. Maybe since I got some red out already, I might just go ahead and put some in this stained glass window here at the same time I'm working in this area. So I'm going to try to keep my hands off of stuff and maybe go up here next to that orange. Looks like a good spot for it. So you really have got to work hard to protect the part of the painting that you've already made so it doesn't get destroyed, you know. Okay, that's looking fantastic. Sometimes you get in the groove, you get in your flow state, and excuse me, everything starts working for you. Sometimes you know, and you never do. So you just gotta. Some days when you're having success, you just gotta go with what's working for you. And in this case, this is kind of working for us. So let's keep it going then. Now this should be dry enough for me to put my slip sheet over top of. Let's get a little more, just a touch of water, maybe melt a little of that. Now let's see what happens when we put it on over the pizza sign. That looks pretty good too. So I may eventually have to paint my pizza in too. That's up here above the sign. For the people that can't read the word pizza. Can't tell that it's a pizza place by the smell of oregano, garlic. Okay, this is working out. Sometimes you just get in that flow state and you can really control the brush. And the viscosity of the paint also is very important. And just having that right touch with the brush and that very good control over how the paint runs and moves around is, I guess, probably the most important part of this. If you can figure out how to do that, you can paint now. So, bumping the table is not good though. Okay, let's see what we got. That's looking pretty good too. Pizza, delivery, it's all good. So now just got to continuously go back and, you know, continue to work on details as we find that we have left them out, or we've got areas of dry paint that we can paint next to. So let's continue on here. I'm going to grab my cup of Java, and I'm going to go back to this door right here from yesterday and clean out my brush. And I think I'm going to go with a blue window this time in this one. So I'm going to melt a little bit of blue, and that would be this one right here, just next to the green. And I don't think I've used much blue today. So let's see what we got there. I always like to kind of test it on my paper towel just to see, get an idea of what I'm going to get when I start putting it onto the painting. Okay, now this is going to be tricky because I have to paint around the sign, but I can probably paint over top of the string, and I'll go back and detail that in with a fine line marker, perhaps. So it looks like the Dayton Daily News Journal Herald there is open for business. At least in this town. Okay, a little bit of water there to melt this. There we go. A little more blue, and I am using just minute amounts of paint, as you can see. So if you got paint all up the, all over the metal part of your brush and all up the handle, you are doing this all wrong. You need to only be using just the finest point of the brush. And ever since I've gone to what I call direct instruction, which is this method that you are observing right now, where I paint and you paint and we paint together, and you watch somebody who knows how to do it, operate, and then you can just try to, imitate what you see as much as possible, and that is how you learn these things. The mediated learning experience, or what's called direct instruction in some places. Okay, so my sign, let's say that it's open. Got to get in here. That little area is tricky. I could just paint over the line, but I don't think it looks like that's what I'm going to have to do. I try to paint around the lines a lot of times, but it's just not as easily done as is to say. It's easy to say, it's just not easy to do. Alright, here we go again. Ooh, almost knocked over the rinse water there. That would have been potentially disastrous. Alright, this is starting to look pretty good. So each day, as you can tell, the process simply is that we paint in things, large areas, and then we go back and we just address details as we go. And that's how it's really done. Now over here on the Army Engineers building over there, we could maybe do some detail work there also. I'm thinking I'm going to use some watered down black to make my doors kind of grayish colored. So I'm going to just clean out my brush. The black is on the extreme far right, and we're going to not make it real strong. We want it to be very much like this, a charcoal gray color, maybe even lighter than that if we can make it that way. So you just got to be very careful about using black. You can always add more of it, but you certainly can't take it out once it is on the painting. So my advice is just proceed cautiously with these things. And I'm going to paint it in one panel at a time. Now see, that's already too dark, so I'm going to have to water it down. And I'm going to have to water it down some more. Maybe go up in here. There we go. Now it's starting to be a little bit less jet black and a little bit more grayish. So if I just keep moving it around, I'll probably be okay. Because as I move it around, you'll notice it lightens up. But I don't want that dark, dark, dark black effect. I want a kind of a charcoaly gray. And I'm starting to kind of get it there. Now if we leave just a little micro space, between the panels of the doors, I think that that is also going to be a good idea as well. Now in this case, this garage door is kind of coming as partially raised or lowered depending on how you see things. And we can that kind of enhances that three-dimensional effect there, because you can see under the garage door a bit, the opposite side of the interior of this building. Okay, so now I'm getting that kind of grayish effect. That's what I'm trying to achieve here. Okay, and you you can get, you know, even though it can be some pretty thin runny paint, you can get some pretty good control with it if you're just patient, you know, and you don't have too soggy of a brush. As in watercolor, that's a problem if you want control. Okay, now we'll go up here and just melt all this and see if we can't get that little tiny micro space in between the panels of the garage door. Just get just a dot more. My stomach is growling. There we go. Okay, I'm going to try to leave that tiniest, thinnest little white line showing. See, but on top of it, I paint right up to the line. That's what I did the one below it. Now this is getting a little bit runny on me too. I've got to take a little bit of the runny paint off the brush. Ooh. Okay. Alright, making pretty decent progress here today. Okay, well, it's kind of working for me, but it's fighting with me a little bit too, and your materials will always, you know, not always, how do I want to say this, you can depend on your materials not necessarily, you know, behaving exactly the same way every day. I wasn't expecting that. That kind of caught me off guard. Well, we'll finish up this garage door. That will be it for today. That's been a pretty successful session. Lots of detail work getting done. Okay, now lastly, I think that's where we finished up yesterday too, was working on this gray door that's on the side of this building. Okay. So I just kind of got to keep melting that gray down. Just kind of scrubbing along with the paintbrush, just barely any moisture in it whatsoever. Okay, just got to keep at it. Now this is, you don't get in a rush just because it's the end of the period, see? You've got to stay focused. Stay focused. And we're just using the extremely fine point of the brush here. We're leaving that tiny micro space in between the door panels if we can achieve it. Ooh, that's pretty, almost lost it there, but steered it back onto the road. Okay, now we're just kind of smoothing out that dark spot in there that I'm trying to melt down. I'm trying so I get a nice uniform color.